Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a topic that we know from past experience is very popular, very important, critical. It kind of, in a sense, underlines the very major differences between internal combustion vehicles and electric vehicles. We are talking about how can the grid plus the home plus the car come together for 2035. So we're giving ourselves plenty of time to sort this out, but it is a fascinating topic, and it's a fascinating technology that really could be, I think, transformative. We've got a very well-informed panel joining us today. At the far end of the panel is Josey Wardle, who is Innovation Lead at V2G and EV Charging at Innovate UK. Next to Josey is Maden, who is the COO and co-founder of Fuse, who are in this area as well. Next to Will is Claire. Claire Miller is a mobility and energy advisor, and she used to work for Octopus. I don't want to always mention that, but you did a lot of stuff at Octopus with EV charging, building and grid.
I was one of the founding directors. So
yes, very important, that aspect. And next to Claire is Jim Hunt, who is managing director of V2G Limited, and who has enormous experience in this occasionally complex field. But Josey, do you mind if I start with you to really talk about what this is, and how grid, home and car can work together, and why it's important?
Yep, thank you. Hi everyone, so what we're talking about is what we call V2X. It means vehicle to everything. It means being able to use your car as an energy storage and transfer device, as well as for transport. So it means we can use our massive car batteries to store, for instance, renewably generated energy and then feed that back into the grid, or indeed choose to use it to power your home, so any of your items in your home, or indeed sell it to something else, like your workplace buildings, or like another vehicle, anything like that. So it means we can use our vehicles, cars, vans, HGVs with massive batteries as well, even boats in the future, to store energy and make better use of it. Because as we move towards this decarbonisation of transport, with electrification being a very major part of that, it becomes about understanding how much energy we need and making best use of the energy that we have available. And that's what V2X, or Vehicle to Everything, is there for. That's what it'll help us to do.
Very good, thank you. And Will, I mean, I've heard about this for so long, and we've discussed this many times, but what is stopping that becoming mainstream today? Why is every electric vehicle already plugged into a vehicle to X, a V2X system?
I think there's lots of things that actually stop it. I think probably the biggest one is probably cars. They're just not quite set up for it yet. There's only some out there that are. And one of the reasons for that is actually the timescale to getting a new car launched is a lot longer than most people think. That these cars in here were probably designed, I don't know, 10 years ago?
10 years ago, yeah.
And so it takes a while. So new concepts take a while to filter through. So this is why at the moment we're doing a lot with retrofitting vehicles to be able to prove the concept and make it work. That's one of them. There are many others, as I'm sure we'll come to.
Yes, yes. And Claire, I mean, one of the questions that pops to mind, because I've heard it mentioned many times, is it's all well and good with your fancy V2G, but it's going to ruin my battery that I paid a lot of money for. What is the latest knowledge and data on that?
Yeah, I feel like I should probably shout out Llewellyn, who's in here somewhere. He's around anyway. So there is a battery chemist in the house somewhere who can answer this in more detail. But at a top level, I think we need to think about these EVs and these EV batteries in a different way to an engine. And I'm a mechanical engineer by training, so I'm deeply in love with the engine. So I'm on this sort of lifelong kind of recovery from the engine and thinking about the fact it's a mechanical system, it can wear out, there are components. Batteries don't work like that. Yeah. Batteries are chemical systems, and so the way that we drive, how heavy your right foot is, I don't know where Jack is, but he was talking about having a heavy right foot earlier, like that has an impact on how well the battery lasts or how fast it will degrade. With vehicle to grid, and with any kind of energy in and out of the battery, that's a really gentle process for the battery. If you're just charging at 7 kilowatt overnight and then you're exporting energy out at 7 kilowatt. So I think it's like retraining our brains to think about batteries. As much of how we drive them, how we charge them, will impact how fast they degrade. And it's really different to having a petrol or diesel engine. So it's not as easy as if I do this much cycling for powering my home with the car or selling it back to the grid with the car, I will use it up, because that isn't quite how it works.
Right.
I'll stop there, because at this point we do need someone like Llewellyn to step in with the battery chemistry bit.
Yeah,
So,
chemistry bit, yeah. But Jim, now I know you've been involved in V2G for a long time. Can you, for me, do the very basic differentiation between the two commonly used ways of getting electricity out of a car, AC and DC, and can you explain which wires do what and what the difference is?
I can try. Can we have a show of hands? Who understands the difference between AC and DC in the audience?
That's a healthy, what a well-educated audience we've got. Amazing.
Certainly not everybody. So,
no, not everyone.
AC stands for alternating current, which is the main supply to your house is alternating nominally 240 volts, 50 hertz in Great Britain. But the battery, the traction battery in an electric vehicle, like a massive Duracell or whatever, we got Duracell back earlier, is DC, direct current. And there's always problems switching from one to another. And that's a big problem with V2X, V2G in particular. I'm starting to get very technical, but I don't see I can avoid it. There's a piece of electronics called an inverter, and that converts DC from a Duracell or a traction battery in a Nissan Leaf or whatever into AC that can power your home, your toaster, your cooker, your heat pump, or even in the future, Octopus have actually got a trial at the moment of the V2G domestic. You can get paid for
selling your electricity.
But the Innovate UK trials thus far have all been DC, which involves a big inverter, expensive bit of kit, and since Innovate UK stopped helping pay for them, it's all gone a bit quiet, as we discussed yesterday. So I'll pass over. Hopefully that made some sense.
Can I just quickly say, because the way I've learned to understand it is, when you plug your car in at home, that is AC, and when you plug your car into a rapid charger on the motorway, that's DC. That's one way of understanding it. Yeah. Sorry, Josey. Yeah.
That's fine. I just want to speak to Jim's point there. So, in the UK, we've been funding development of both AC and DC bidirectional charging for many years now, and there's currently a programme of demonstration projects developing AC and DC bidirectional chargers and running them in fleet operations around the country to prove that this is possible. This follows on the back of a vehicle-to-grid specific programme, which was looking at that particular bit of storing the energy in your vehicle, then selling it back to the grid. And Octopus were a key part of that. OVO was another key part of that. Those dealing with domestic consumers, so people, householders like yourselves, were able to save, on average, about £350 a year on their energy bills by doing that back in 2020, 2021. So it is possible, absolutely, it's technically possible. Octopus have now come to market with the first fully commercial proposition for this. And the other electricity providers are looking to follow as demand rises. So it absolutely is possible, but as Will said in his introduction, we are slightly limited at the moment by the number of vehicles available that can actually do this. However, all the Nissan Leafs made since 2015 can do this already. So the capability is very much there.
Yeah. And Will, can you explain, because the other very obvious area is with fleets, and obviously, if you're a company with 50 vans and you can afford to install the equipment, then you can do this. But can you explain it, because I just love refuse collection and dustbin lorries.
Yeah, we're quite heavily involved in a bin lorry collection project, and it sounds very messy, but what we've got is essentially two very big bin lorries with big batteries. They're fully charged in the morning. They go out, they do their rounds, and then they come back to base having emptied, and their batteries are still probably 75–80% full because the batteries are so big, because they need to be for the size of the lorry. At that point, we plug them into these chargers which allow us to support the grid at peak time, because the duty cycles for the bin lorries allow them to come back and be ready to use at that time. And this really, for me, shows the benefits of V2G, particularly with fleets, and it's all about the sort of duty cycles of those vehicles.
Right.
Domestic V2G is really important as well, but it answers a slightly different problem because it's at different times, and actually offers, in my mind, a really great answer to a problem that maybe not got so much attention, which is if you've got a car that's full and you move it to a hospital for parking, you can use that car to power that hospital during the day. Maybe turning it around and using it as replacement for upgrades to the national grid is a way of looking at V2G with cars.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing there, the possibilities every time we have one of these conversations, the possibilities get bigger and more, and there's more opportunities, more different ideas coming through.
Yeah.
But there is a frustration, obviously, it does seem to be taking a long time. I mean, can you quickly explain that manufacturers are not building the ability to, or they are starting to now, but they haven't been up to recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why you'll hear the term V2X more and more, and I think those of us in the industry now are starting to use V2X as vehicle to everything, and then we can think about specific use cases. So I think that's something to keep, everyone here, I would consider you all early adopters and early experts in this technology, so kind of come with us on that journey of thinking about V2X. And then in terms of the vehicle manufacturers, I think whether they're fleet vehicles and on the heavy end, or they're the passenger vehicles that you and I would like to own and drive, those vehicle manufacturers have got a lot of new stuff going on for them. They need to think about connected cars, so taking data from the car to build new services for their customers and for their, understanding what's happening to different systems on the vehicle. They're thinking about autonomy, so autonomous vehicles are coming, in the next 5 to 10 years we'll see that too. They're also thinking about energy and how these EVs are also an energy storage device. So they've got a lot going on, and each vehicle manufacturer is going to tackle that in a different order, a different way. And so I share that frustration. Also, Nissan Leaf has CHAdeMO, which can do the bidirectional charging. And when I was leading PowerLoop, which is one of the portfolio of projects that Josey was leading on V2G, we used those vehicles because they were enabled, and they've proved out so much of the technology and so much of how it looks and feels. But CHAdeMO won't persist, unfortunately, certainly not in Europe and the US. So actually, the vehicle manufacturers keep an eye on are people like Volvo, Renault, VW, so lots of big brands that you've heard of are looking at doing this. And the question I always get is, but when and which one should I get? And I need to know which one to buy. And so, I don't know, hands up in here, anyone looking for their next car to be V2X enabled and thinking about it? Yeah, so lots of folk here today. What I would say is, first and foremost, if you are ready to get a new EV, or maybe it's a used EV but new to you, get the vehicle you need for it to be a vehicle. Okay, because you may be waiting quite a long time for that to be unlocked. But that said, keep an eye on the brands like Renault, Volvo. They will bring these vehicles, but they need to learn about what does it feel like as a customer? What should the app look like? How do they make money out of selling energy back to the grid? Sorry, very long answer. I know you said
that's good.
The final part is about the grid to home to car and back again. I think a lot of us, can see it's really, really obvious. I've got this big battery. I want to use it to store energy when it's cheap at night and then to run my home. And that makes total pragmatic sense. What I would say is, if you think about from the vehicle manufacturer's perspective, they put a lot of work into developing the systems, into testing it, into bringing the system to market. How do they then get some return if they're putting those systems on the car? Maybe that's something we can explore a bit, is actually, because from a vehicle manufacturer's perspective, if it's just used to power your home, they aren't then selling any energy back to the grid. So there's a bit there about business models and why vehicle to home maybe hasn't come as fast as otherwise pragmatically should have done.
Yeah. And Jim, I think an important point of this as well is that it's, any one individual, it's quite, however the technology develops, it's quite an expensive thing to install in your house, it's extra technology. And the idea of community sharing a community system is something you've been working on, am I right? Is that?
Indeed, yes. An exceedingly good point. I was chatting to Tom, I think he's talking later if he's fit, from North Yorkshire Council about this just last night over, in my case, one too many beers. But so if you can amortise the cost over a village or a housing estate. If you go the AC route, I didn't get to the end of that tale earlier, the bi-directional AC charging stations are currently at least cheaper than the DC variety that was used for the big trials by Octopus and Ovo. So one of the things we've been working on quietly is actually a cheap as chips, slow, bi-directional charging station. North Yorkshire seem to be quite interested, so do West Yorkshire. So I'm happy to be back in Yorkshire. I was born in Harrogate, but I haven't been here since I was 5. Does that answer your question? Because I could prattle on forever.
Well, no, it is just that notion of, one of the innovations I saw in Australia in a recent visit is community batteries. So there's all these houses with solar, but not everybody can afford to put a battery in the house. It's kind of like have dozens of batteries. So what they've done is instead installed one big battery in a suburb, very much like you were saying in a housing estate, which everyone then benefits from. It's very cleverly connected with software. And in a sense, if you could do that with vehicles, instead of installing a battery, you have a place where you can charge vehicles that you can't, people who can't plug in at home. There's multiple fantasies that I have like that.
Well, it's not really a fantasy. I'm just going to say that if you can share the car as well as the battery, share the storage, but share the car amongst the community.
Josey,
So
it's obvious you've got nothing to say.
one second, because Josey wasn't here yesterday, so you were making the point yesterday. And I'll pass over to Josey. Sorry, Josey.
That's fine. I was just going to say, Will is involved in exactly one of those projects called the Rural Energy Resilience Project, which is doing exactly what you're talking about there. It's taking renewable generated energy from community buildings in very rural parts of Cumbria and using the cars to store that energy, and they are community car share vehicles. So the population have access to transport and access to renewable energy. So yes, we're doing it.
Right, and access to storage.
I was going to keep that quiet because it's the wrong side of the Pennines, so apologies.
It's all north, Will.
Well, yes.
That's true, it's all north. For a softy southerner like me, it's all north.
The other benefit as well is that actually, because of the ratio of what houses need to use energy-wise versus what can be stored in a car, is you can have one car in a power cut situation. You can have one car powering multiple houses in theory. And this is just another one of those things that needs to be explored.
I'm laughing because I'm going to say, what about black start batteries and transfer switches? But that's a bit geeky. That's how you run your house when there's a power cut. Is anyone here putting in a transfer switch and going to bring, yes, look, they're my people. So this is about, if you want to run a home or a building from a vehicle during a power cut, you can't just plug it in. No. So you have to be able to disconnect it completely from the grid.
I know that as a gateway, that's what I was talking about.
Gateway, yes. If you've got a Powerwall, got a Powerwall, maybe 2. Good night, Robert.
Okay,
Is it not just a big lever?
It's very much so, so you can get a little box with your Powerwall that actually disconnects the home from the grid. And so with these systems, and so anyone seen the F-150 Lightning, which is in the US, where Ford have launched this truck?
There actually is one here.
They've got Envision, they've got one here, nice. So that system can power your home, but you have to have the special charger and the special system that disconnects you from the grid. So and I think that's a really interesting one, because in the UK our grid is super resilient. We don't really have that many power cuts, but if you do live rurally, you might get a lot of dodgy brownouts, and if it's going to get stormy here today, so there is a use for it in the UK. So
oh, definitely. No, we do get them where we live, and it's very good. I just want to make sure that, because when we've ever discussed V2G, we always get lots of questions. I want to make sure we've got time to answer them. So if anyone's got a question they'd like to ask the panel, there's a microphone there and there. And please do jump up and ask a question, especially now, because I've run out of questions momentarily until I look at my notes.
I don't have questions.
Which is why I would
maybe whilst you're talking, I do love a show of hands. I do love it. Is anyone here a power looper? Is anyone on power loop?
Oh.
No power loopers. Oh, see, they're a dying breed. We only have.
Can you explain what a power looper is?
So power loop was part of the original vehicle to grid portfolio projects, which Josey oversaw, and the bid for that was in 2017. So going back way. Those projects were exploring domestic vehicle to grid, like what would it look like, what would you need, how would you get someone to get their vehicle and a charger. So we learned so much. We learned about, how tricky it is to get permission still to export to the grid from someone's home. But we learned about actually how once you've lived with vehicle to grid for not that long, you just plug it in when you get home, let the system work it out for you. It will export energy at times when there's a need for energy on the grid, so often tea time, kettle, the classic, kettle goes on, heating, lighting, and then charge your car back up overnight. And we learned that people very quickly go, yeah, that's easy, just plug it in and get on with my life, and in the morning come back and the car's charged, and I've saved some money there. So that was power loop. Sorry.
We've got a question. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to ask. So with the DC virtual grid, you were saying it only works with CHAdeMO currently. What's been the challenge with making that work with CCS?
Actually,
very good question.
I'll go in. It doesn't just work with CHAdeMO, it's just that CHAdeMO is enabled first.
Okay.
So a lot of the work that Jim's been involved with is about the ISO 15118-20 standard, which will enable AC and DC CCS to do bi-direction as well. And that's now out, even if it's only in draft form, it is out. So a lot of the vehicle manufacturers and charger manufacturers around the world and in the UK are working on enabling that for DC CCS vehicles and AC vehicles as well. But they still have that development lead time that Will mentioned of 5 to 10 years to get those vehicles out to market. However, they are already working on it. Jim, would you add anything else?
I was going to dive into a technical excess perhaps, but 15.11.8-2 was the original version, that's published. -20 is the version that allows DC V2X, or BPT, bidirectional power transfer as we call it in the trade. But there's an addendum to 15.11.8-20 that we're still working on in the smoke-filled back offices of the IEC, which will enable a full AC vehicle to grid, but it's still in development. And that's part of the reason why there aren't loads of CCS bidirectional, particularly AC vehicles on the streets of Great Britain at the moment, but maybe next year.
Wireless as well, I think, is in draft as
And
well.
wireless, actually we haven't mentioned wireless, but I just want to quickly say the reason I do the job I do and these people do the job they do is they can remember those numbers and letters. There's no way I could ever remember that. There's so many of them, I'm really impressed. But can you just quickly touch on wireless charging? You did mention that the other day.
Yeah, so now we've moved through several cycles of Innovate UK funding, which Josey's presided over. Anyone wants to know about these projects, well, grab Josey, because she's encyclopedic knowledge, it's brilliant. So one of the projects that's now going ahead is between a company called Electric Green, who are developing wireless charging for vehicles, which is bi-directional, and they're doing a project with Royal Mail to make those Royal Mail vans wirelessly chargeable and dischargeable. So it's part of the same sort of group of projects that we're all sort of involved in, really, is to, when those vans come back in the afternoon, let's use them to run the buildings, let's use them to support the grid. So yeah, wireless bi-directional charging is coming.
Wow, that sounds great. So we've got one here. Yes, sorry, sir. Yes.
Hello. Vehicle to grid is absolutely brilliant. But what do we do in the position where we have blocks of flats which are leasehold properties, where the residents don't actually have the power to be able to put charges in to be able to do that?
So I can answer this one, because weirdly the first time I met Josey was on a project that was answering this problem, but not blocks of flats. We were looking at terraced housing with non-off-street parking, and there are community benefit societies out there. There are people that will put in charge points at car parks in the locality, and they'll run them on behalf of the tenants. And it's that kind of solution, it's that sort of out-of-the-box thinking that actually needs to happen.
But sorry, can I say, I think the leasehold is the particular question you're asking. So leasehold, tell me if I've got this wrong, but it's difficult to get permission
from the
as a leaseholder
to get the managing agent to actually
so I suspect that's the question you're asking.
Matt Adams, is it? Matt, are you here? I can't, it's quite bright. Is Matt in here? There you go. So Matt, who's waving his hand at the back, there you go. Matt is the Transport Policy Lead at the Renewable Energy and Clean Tech Association, which is snappily titled. And Matt works tirelessly in the area of policy to look at how do we unlock not just bi-directional, but actually like charging.
Just charging.
And so I would say actually Matt is a brilliant person to speak to get mean, the latest policy news, but also to give him your sort of lived examples and experiences, because it's only by taking that then to politicians that we can start to shape policy around this, because it is a really important one. Getting that permission is very hard for leaseholders at the moment.
Thank you very much.
And get out and vote, dare I say.
Oh yeah, get out and vote, yeah. I don't know if you knew about that, maybe. Yes, sir.
First of all, point of frustration. As I live in rural Northern Ireland with solar and a Leaf, 2018 Leaf, I can't use V2, which is annoying. Does V2X pose a risk to the grid? As the grid bit becomes less, we can use our vehicles to charge our homes, anything else. There's less of a revenue stream for the grid. So does V2X pose a risk to the grid?
Oh, so an economic risk rather than a
as everything,
technical one.
They become less and less influence as we store more energy at home, water, batteries, anything else. They're going to have less and less influence.
I think from an economic perspective, the energy needs to come from somewhere originally. So I think it's always going to have its place. From a technical perspective, I'm not the right person to answer that question.
I think we need, when we think about the renewable assets on the grid, we need to think about storage. Okay, so renewable energy is becoming the lion's share of energy on the grid, and that will continue. But in order to maintain a stable grid with lots of renewable energy, we need to have lots of storage. And so it is about, our whole grid is going to transform in the next sort of 10, 20 years to this very high renewables, but we need very high storage. And V2G can form part of that, but we need also diversity. So it can't just be one kind of storage. And also, it's still a car, and that's really important to keep in mind. It has to be part of the mix of what's on the grid, but it's still a car. So you'll hear people talk about statistical and stochastic models, which is how likely is it that someone has come home and plugged in, scaled over hundreds of thousands of vehicles. So it's definitely part of the mix, but it's only one part of the mix.
There's one other thing to add, which is that actually using these storage devices is a way of delaying the need to reinforce the grid. So it's actually offsetting that need for urgent increases in grid capacity. So we need to balance all of these things together to make the best use of the economic situation that we find ourselves in and the targets that we're trying to reach towards 2050. So it's just one of many tools, as Claire mentioned.
The point I'm trying to make is that, as Robert has pointed out on the podcast many times, connection times for renewable energy projects are 10, 15 years down the line. At the moment, my leased panels generate more power than I can use. My car can power my house theoretically. As local storage becomes more and more prevalent, the grid will have less and less of an influence. So it's that catch-up period that concerns me. We're 15 years away. Every major industrial project is being mandated to store energy because the grid can't keep up. It's a chicken and egg cart horse.
Can I possibly address your point? I think I've already mentioned I was born in Yorkshire, so maybe I'd be a bit blunt. And you know from yesterday I like four-letter acronyms. I use a four-letter word.
Oh, give us a four-letter acronym.
No, it's a four-letter word.
Oh, four-letter.
In my humble but expert in some ways opinion, it's still all arse backwards, or if I can change my metaphor, back to front. It's still the grid. It's too much top down, and it needs to be more bottom up, in my opinion. I don't know if that answers your question. I could prattle on at length, but that's my view. The rest of the panel may disagree.
I would think, one would hope it would be a blend of the two. The consumers are buying these cars and going, hang on a minute, I've got a massive battery sat outside my house and I can't use it to run my cooker. And then from the top down you can see the benefits, the obvious benefits of having, we've now got 1 million electric vehicles on the road. That's a million kilowatt hours, take one from each. I don't know what 1 million kilowatt hours is in terms of total energy consumption, but it's a big chunk already.
It is a big chunk. And just think how many cars there are that haven't been transitioned.
Yeah.
These are huge batteries rolling around, or will be huge batteries rolling around the road that could do so much more than just power a car.
Yes, because that was the thing that was mentioned in another panel. I'm now confused by this time of the weekend, that battery storage globally has just overtaken pumped storage, which is mind-boggling, because pump storage is huge.
It was this morning's panel, because
It was this morning. Thank you. Couldn't remember when that was. Oh, yes, sir. Question here. We've got yes, we've just got time quickly. Yes, thank you. Can you get a bit nearer the mic? Sorry.
We've touched on this already, but for vehicles that are already being advertised by their manufacturers as V2G compatible, I'm thinking of things like the 2024 Skoda Enyaq. Even the dealers don't seem to know any more kind of details on that, and I just wondered, is there any point that cause it sounds like some of these standards are still being kind of worked out, is there any advantage in going for that, or is it more like a sort of the old VHS Betamax argument of...
Well, super briefly, guys, see over time. I think vehicle manufacturers are starting to talk about it. If they're talking about it publicly, it means they have a plan to deploy it. Often the dealers are the last ones to find out what the features are and what they should do. That's a whole other topic in itself, a whole other panel in itself.
I mean, you just mentioned the word dealer. And
yeah, and it's hard.
It's
hard for them. So what I would say is, like, look out for the vehicle manufacturer brand joining up with an energy company, with a charger manufacturer, with a flexibility provider. We didn't even use the word flexibility today. They will come in kind of closed ecosystems to start with. It will be a bundle, a kind of walled garden system. So again, go for the car that you prefer to be a car first and foremost, because lots of them will bring solutions in the next, say, 5 years as we start to get into the early majority, which will be V2G enabled.
This is a conversation that I know we haven't finished yet. We've barely started. We're going to be having this conversation at many events in the future, but we have run out of time. I'd just love to thank you for your attention, and I'd love you to thank this amazing panel for illuminating